All right. Welcome back to the Wags and Fresh podcast. It's been a couple weeks since we've had a chance to get together. I was traveling for work. We tried to put something together while I was out there in Vegas, but unfortunately, it just did not work out from a logistics standpoint. But yeah, we got a lot to catch up on. Got a fun conversation game to play today, so we'll get into that. But yeah, I just wanted to kind of open today with just a little bit of a recap of what have you been up to over the last couple of weeks.
Just about everything, man. Books, cover to books, new technology at the office for care, a whole new program for care for people, just every aspect of my life. Sort of compartmentalizing. I guess my thing from this morning was it's okay to multitask when you're taking a bike ride, like bike ride and listening to music.
Sure.
But there are three areas that I've determined are no longer up for multitasking, and that's time with God, time with family, and time with people. So
Makes
that's
sense.
an area that I need to dial in on. So that's been my new focus.
That's it's funny because I think that a lot of people, think of that term multitasking as a positive attribute, and there's some value to that. And there are plenty of times when you kind of have to do some multitasking. But there is also, I think, what you're making the point there of is that there are certain things in your life that require the proper attention that you don't want to be thinking about or focusing on a couple other things other than that singular most important thing at that moment. I'm a little fortunate in the fact that I'm sort of hardwired to already think that way. I'm not a great multitasker. I can do some of it, but even like yesterday, I was trying to do a handful of things, and I sent out an email, and I get a call going, we're not doing that. And I was like, oh yeah, so I made a mistake because I was trying to do too many things, and that's just not my strength. I'm much more of, I can get the same list of things done, but I have to do it in an order, right? I do this, and then I do this, and then I do this, and then I do this. I'm not real strong at trying to do all those things at the same time and getting them done in the same time frame. It's just not a strength of mine.
Well, even if let me take it out of the multitask category, because that may be like somebody riding a bike and listening to music, doing two things at once. But it's more about being present.
Yep.
And so the big thing I've been on the last 2 weeks is the difference between present with a T and presence with a C.
Okay.
And the real presence with a T come from presence with a C.
Right.
And the more you can do that, the more you'll receive. But sometimes we're so happy with the present with a T that it takes us out of the presence with a C, or we're looking forward to getting the present with a T, so we're not staying in the C. Not to confuse the alphabet and people all around, but the end of the story is all the great presents with a T come from having presence with a C.
And I think that's really what we've probably thematically been talking about in a lot of our conversations, because it's about being focus on the process, not so much the result. You have to have a goal, and you need to be, have a target, and that's where the present with a T comes from. You
as an out product.
You're right, correct, as a result of that. But the presence with a C is is what it is that you do every day. It's that process that ultimately gets you that reward in the first place. So. For me, I've like I said, I went out to Vegas for work. I had some ups and downs the last couple weeks, both personally and professionally. Nothing crazy, nothing like, earth-shattering, just, those, ebbs and flows you have, not being super excited about something at work, or, something along the lines of, just struggling with different aspects of things at home. Nothing that's concerning. Just more of those ruts you get into from time to time. But as you know, I got myself out of that. I was
nothing a little rock and roll can't solve.
Right, exactly. I was finding myself stuck in this with this one specific song in mind. That was, I wouldn't say it was. I guess it was a kind of a hopeless song. It was definitely a song that was.
It's what you wanted at the time.
At the moment, it was exactly defining where I was at the moment emotionally, and I couldn't get that song out of my head for days and days and days. And it's not a song that I ever really listened to a lot when it was released, but it was a song nonetheless that I found myself digging into like daily. And finally, I think actually you sent me a video clip that morning that I kind of pulled myself out of it. And it was very inspirational, so I appreciate that.
Cool.
You know, that was the I can't remember his name off the top of my head. The
D.D. Jakes.
Yeah, correct. Yeah. So just really about not wasting time, right? And it was about 7-minute video clip or something like that, and it was just really talking about some of his sermons about not wasting time and how important it is to do what you have to do right now. And so that I have a long drive to work some days, and that day in particular was almost 2-hour drive to work with traffic and so forth. And between listening to that as well as some phone calls that I had to make, I didn't have a lot of time that I was listening to music. So when I had that one moment, I picked up a radio station out of Philadelphia that I have pre-programmed on my car, because I do get close enough to Philadelphia on a regular basis to pick up that channel. I had never heard that song before, that group before, and now I'm obsessed with this group now.
Oh, that all came out of it? Not just the group, but the song and the whole
thing?
Oh, that was perfect.
Yeah, and actually the song on the radio wasn't even the song that I sent you, because the song on the radio was a little more poppy. And then
but you liked the sound.
Right, well, I liked the sound, and then I researched them, and I saw
you pulled the thread.
Yeah, exactly. I went right to, as soon as I saw that title, I went right to it to say, hey, I want to listen to this. The band is called The Interpreters, and it's a little old school punk ska. What I like about it is they also have a little bit of in their guitar solos, they have a little bit of a surf guitar vibe over top of that. So a little unique in that, because a lot of the ska punk bands don't put a little surf guitar over the top of it. So, but it sounds very sort of rancid, early 90s, late 80s kind of stuff that we all listened to growing up. So when I heard it was new, I got a little obsessed with it and been going down that rabbit hole. So that, but that's specific, the whole experience ended up kind of jolting me officially out of the funk. I think I was starting to work my way out. The video definitely helped. And then hearing that became sort of the next thing. So that was great. And, and I knew that, we've all go through these things. So I knew at some point I'd find myself getting out of it. But that was a little bit of the struggle more recently. But overall, the trip to Vegas was great. Seeing Phil and Mervis and Bella and Z and everybody was great. They were, they welcomed us for, probably we overstayed our welcome. We were there probably like 7 or 8 hours. But we had a great time catching up with them and playing some trivia games and things like that. So that was fun. And that was ultimately what we tried to put together, was an interview with her. She's still working on a book. Her goal is to have that completed by the end of the year. So hopefully that's what she gets done. And along those lines, where are you at with your work?
Just about 80-90% done. The front cover's finished. I just researched the last couple of days of this week on how to write the back of a book cover. That's the part of the book that sells the book. So putting the sentence together from some YouTube videos I watched on key points that you should have on there, and I just sent that off, and that'll come back. And doing a lot of exercise type videos. So I'm going out and I'm doing workouts. And before, I used to cut and piece and show them fast so that everybody could see all the different things, and then sort of like a palette of paint, take it out and do the workout they wanted to. But what I'm realizing is it's better off, or at least where I'm at right now is what I'm doing is it works better for me to make these videos and then just release one exercise at a time. Mm-hmm. So then somebody can do it with it, and then I end up getting however many exercises I go out and do that day from one video.
Sure.
So it's saving me time. I'm getting my workout in, and I think more people are going to get out of what I'm trying to share with them. So it was a win-win there.
That's great. And so what is your specific goal to have it completed? Do you have a date in mind that you'd you think you'll have it
I
done?
mean, I'm just at the read through stage now, and I'll just put it out. I don't know, and maybe I'll just probably give myself a month or something.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's always good to have at least a date out there that you're shooting for, right? Because
Yeah.
if you miss it here or there, it's not a big
Well,
deal.
especially when you're involved with something that's your life,
Right.
the material would never end.
Right. Yeah.
Like I'm still, if I still get on pieces of equipment that I've used for 5, 10, 15 years, and because I spend time on it, before I know it, I'm doing something without even thinking, and it's a whole new movement and benefit that I didn't have out of hours of not only doing it, but even I actually think about this stuff for hours too. So
Sure.
even with all my thought, with all my time doing it, somehow spending time doing something new evolves.
So one of the things I think is always the tricky balance, right? Is how do you get material and content, to people who want to listen to it in a timely manner, but it has to be done in a way that can be received properly and that you're comfortable with. Too,
Right. Once it's done, it's done. Like I can't really do a whole thing and tell people how to move their elbow a quarter of an inch to get
Sure.
this other muscle that I just started stretching.
Sure.
Because
But-
that's how much I'm into it. But so people don't need that.
Well, and I also think
If
that
they spend time doing what I'm telling them to do, they'll find that within the time that they end up doing it.
And I think the point I was getting at was that there's always going to be more stuff that you can add, and in many cases you're not even going to know what those things are until you put this out, so that somebody says, "Did you ever think about
Right.
how to apply your principles to this particular task or that particular task?" So I think that at some point it actually becomes, I need to put that out there because I need to get that feedback to know what would be the next pieces of
Right, because I can only think about what I can think about.
and only what interests you and what you
Exactly,
do.
yeah.
You don't know what somebody else does. So they're doing different things. So well, that's good to hear that that's happening, and so I'm glad we finally got back kind of on track. I was sort of the Cliff Notes version of the last 2 weeks, I guess.
Right.
But it was nonetheless, I think, required. It was at times kind of a exhilarating couple weeks, but it was really sort of highs and lows for me. So I'm kind of glad to find that equilibrium right now. But the highs are fun, and the lows, are temporary, and you got to work through them. So, we're human, and that happens. So that's the way that. But the good news for me is, as you know, I've been trying to make a conscious effort away from staying away from certain things, alcohol, bad foods, overeating, things that can get you into triggered. Hey, you're upset, so here's a nice thing that I could eat this, I could drink this, I could, mask the pain temporarily, and I've been avoiding that pretty regularly, and even to the point where I've had so little alcohol since last year that I had 3 glasses of wine the other day, and I said to Jesse, I was like, man, I feel like I drank 2 bottles. Like, so my body's already kind of adjusting to not having that, having alcohol in my system, which is fine by me. It's not really something I care about one way or the other. We all know that there's some serious negatives to that. But a couple glasses of wine is not a big deal either. So anyway, sorry, I got a little sidetracked there, but all right. So let's dive into our conversation game for today. So why don't you kind of explain what the concept is and what we're going to do here, and we'll get off and running.
Okay, so I pulled up a list of 100, I guess, famous people or people who've done a lot in their lifetime. And what we're going to do is open somebody up, spend about 20 to 30 seconds reading through who they are. The person will pick the person from history that they want to represent. And after we read the 30 seconds about that person, the other person will ask questions, and that person will respond as they are the person from history.
Right, with some flexibility on obviously accuracy where we don't know.
Oh, this won't be accurate at
Yeah,
all.
yeah. This will be. It'll be interesting to see how we merge ourselves with these people.
Yeah, yeah.
So nonetheless, but it was. It's an interesting idea of a conversation game. So.
All right, so Justin first picked Ernest Hemingway. Born July 21st, 1899 to July 2nd, 1961, an American author and journalist. Unique understanding and writing style, a strong influence of the 20th century fiction and culture. Hemingway lived through major conflicts in Europe, the first half of the 12th century. Experiences with war led to powerful accounts and described the horrors of modern war. Two major books, The Farewell to Arms and For Whom the Bell Tolls, about the Spanish Civil War. Books are considered American classics. Born in Illinois, there was a couple quick points I saw on here. Enlisted in the Red Cross to volunteer as an ambulance driver. He was sent to the Italian front where he saw the horrors of the trench war. In 1918, he was seriously wounded from mortar fire and he was sent home to recuperate. He was awarded the Italian Silver Medal of Bravery for helping an Italian soldier despite his injuries. He later wrote a fictional book based on the experiences in the 1929 novel A Farewell to Arms, and spent some time in Paris. But one of my favorite things for him is The Old Man and the Sea, right?
Yeah.
So, okay, Ernest.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. Okay, so my first question would be, what is the difference writing about something you've heard about or read about versus writing about something that you've lived?
Well, I think you could just layer more detail into that because you have experiences that will make the whole, this, even just something like the setting, richer and deeper because you lived in that area, you lived in that town, you lived in that neighborhood, and what the buildings look like and what it smells like, and when you read about what those things are, you don't have that specific experience. So
especially for somebody who knows what you're writing about,
right? And that's the other part. I mean, I think that you always hear that write what you know, but there has to be at times some element of creativity and flexibility that you expand, whether it's the characters or the setting, to make it a little different, little unique. Maybe not exactly. You're not writing autobiographies or things like that, but there's some elements of your life that you inject into that because you have just such a deep personal connection to it and experience with it that allows for it to be more, genuine, I think. I think there's just more of a genuine. I think that there are times when writers try to be more too creative with, like, language becomes more important, and if they've got the skill set, then that's fine. But language is more important than experience, and for me, it's always been about trying to at least add some sort of element of my experiences to the writing.
Now, how about, I know you wrote Old Man and the Sea, but did you read it?
I don't read anything that I write. I let other people read it and tell me where some changes need to be made.
Are you familiar with Old Man and the Sea?
Yes.
So what is your thoughts on that book and what you feel that you meant when you wrote it versus maybe what culture turned it into? It's one of those books that has interpretation, correct? Sure.
And I it's been a while since I've wrote it and and read it. So from what I remember, it really seemed to be more about the struggles of life and how we're sort of time to some degree is passing in our lives that allow for you have the experience and that's where the old man part comes in. But the struggle is sort of consistent, whether you're young or old. That battle with the sea is still real and it's still difficult. And ultimately, you never really are going to master it. You're not going to become, and it's almost like this sea becomes the
you'd be happy to survive it.
Yeah, exactly. I was going to say it's more like it's time, right? Because it's he's just
how well you live it,
living exactly. What is that experience? How do you want to live your life? How do you want that experience to be? Those are choices, and I think sometimes to kind of digress a little bit, it's just that sometimes people feel like they're victims to their circumstances and they can't get out of their own choices. But the sea is what you want it to be, and who you want to be, and what you're doing when you're in the sea and in your life is really your choice.
And was that the one with the big fish on the side of the boat and trying to bring that back?
Yeah,
but it gets eaten up before it even gets back. Yeah, it's awesome.
The one that I
love that book. I feel like Chris Farley. Remember in Man in the Sea,
right?
when you were rowing the boat. Remember that? That was awesome. All right. So, if you were going to write a piece today, not that you have to stay the same Ernest Hemingway you were before, what material do you think you'd be writing about, and what kind of books do you think you'd be writing?
I think the American experience on some level is always has some sort of thread of similarity, no matter what time period you're writing about. So I think that
so war's still ugly, right?
War's still ugly. People are still people. Power's still power. All of those things that tend to be the big themes would all be the same. Not a big believer in the fact that these generationally people are better or worse, or those types of those are just different perspectives, because the older you are, the more you tend to believe that the younger generation is kind of somehow detached from the America that you knew and all that stuff, when the reality is that specifics change, but not the big picture. The big picture doesn't change. No different than when you sit there and watch any news program today, or go on the internet and find the news of the day. The discussions and the arguments are still about the same thing.
Yeah, we think by 2018, 19, whatever it is, that we're just so much more in the know, and things are just so much more open and balanced, and it's just there's just more conversations on a bigger level with social media about the same things that have been going on, and smaller conversation at the factories.
Think about, let's just use a topic like marijuana, right? Marijuana is a big topic of it's just states are making it legal, but it's against the law federally, and it becomes a states versus federal. Who has the control and the rights of making those laws. And there constantly is discussion on states' rights versus federal control and centralized government. And the reality is that was one of the most basic first arguments that was happening in 1776. It's the same argument, right? So, I would probably be writing my experiences in this particular time. There's plenty of things to do. We're sitting here having this podcast, watching people surf and snowboard and do all kinds of fun things using their GoPro. But the reality is that I'm based off of what I was doing back then. I would be doing something that would put me out into the world, that would make me have experiences, that would be me being connected to something. My perception, the perception of me is that I lived a very sort of a life that was rich, that had a lot of experiences, and that's what I ended up writing about. And I would probably be doing the same thing, whether it be any of these extreme sports or being involved in those types of things, or anything that's engaging me in human experiences and being a part of something that then I could write about. So,
being a writer and going in and getting an ambulance job in a war is pretty intense. So you'd have to imagine, you know, people see this side or a writer side, but they don't, you know, sometimes don't get to see the true grit that some people really have and what they're willing to do.
Well, and you know, you read that on a bio that's, you know, 10, you know, not even 2-3 paragraphs long, and the thing that you kind of miss because it's 2 sentences is that he quit his job as a journalist at the Kansas City Star, as a, you know, to go ahead and do that. So he went ahead and took the security out of his life and said, "I'm going to create chaos."
And obviously loved writing. He's a journalist.
Exactly. Yep.
I mean, so he found his muse, which was, you know, giving speech to where maybe a voice wasn't.
Correct.
You know, about what he felt strongly about, which, you know, can be honored just as much or more as the writing.
Exactly right.
That's awesome.
All right, so your choice is Thomas Edison. So I'll read through this. Thomas Edison, born 1847, died 1931, was an American inventor and businessman who developed and made commercially available inventions. Right. So his Edison Electric Company was a pioneering company for delivering DC electricity directly into people's homes. He filed over 1,000 patents. He used mass production techniques to make his inventions available at low costs. His most important inventions including the electrical light bulb, the phonograph, movie picture camera, electric car, electric power stations. He was born in Milan, Ohio, the youngest of 7 siblings, raised in the middle class, not wealthy. They struggled when the railroad bypassed the town. They forced them to move to Michigan, and he attended only 3 months of formal schooling. He irritated his teachers. Wow, this sounds like somebody I know, with repeated questioning and ability to just follow instructions. Let's see. As a youngster, he tried various odd jobs to earn a living. He's got a lot. Unfortunately, from an early age, Edison developed severe deafness, which ultimately left him almost 90% deaf. He would later refuse any medical treatment, saying it would be too difficult to retain his thinking process. He seemed to take his deafness in stride and never saw it as a disability. He had a big break when he saved a young boy on a railway track from being struck by a runaway train. His grateful father had Edison trained as a telegraph operator at age 19, and he moved to Louisville, Kentucky, and started working for Western Union.
The patent office, right? That's
yep.
Yeah.
Let's see. He loved experimenting with chemicals. Those experiments often got him in trouble. One chemistry experiment exploded on a train, working a night shift for Western Union, and had a lead acid battery leak that basically ripped right through the floor of the train. He was fired the next day. In the 1870s, he sold the rights to the telegraph to Western Union for $10,000, gave him the financial backing to establish proper research laboratory and extend his experiments and innovations. Edison once described his invention method as involving a lot of hard work and repeated trial and error until a method was successful. You know, that's where that, I don't think that's a real quote that people say that he had, but that's, let's see.
The quote he lived.
Yeah. In 1877, he developed the phonograph. He received widespread interest, and people were astonished at one of the first audio recording devices. The unique invention earned Edison the nickname the Wizard of Menlo Park. Edison's device would later be improved upon by others, but he made a big step in creating the first recording device.
That's what we're on right now.
That's right. So why don't we just leave it there? And so, because I could probably, he's got a ton of stuff, right?
That's...
So, I guess what was your favorite invention that you created? Or what was the probably the proudest thing that you developed in your life?
I would have to say the process of creating was my favorite creation.
Okay.
I mean, once I learned that I could be interested in something, learn what's been done about it, and go to the laboratory or whenever I had time in a train car and start putting things together and see how they respond and see how maybe sometimes that would turn into something they could be used for, which I didn't realize when I started with the experiment. I was just putting some things together, and then uses came out of it. But then there are other times where I may have had certain things that happen, and then it would create an intention and a drive towards finding something to happen, like the light bulb, which I've been famously, it's been famously said that I've found 1,000 ways not to make a light bulb.
Right.
So I think all those things I'm proud of, and I'm amazed to see where they've gone with cell phones and telephones and just everything. But without having that process and the invention of how to create inventions, half of that stuff wouldn't have been done.
So, what do you think was the thing that probably propelled you to go down this road of invention or creation? What was it that inspired you to do that?
I just think I've always had a desire to, I wouldn't necessarily say just solve problems, but I guess just the nature of curiosity to where, I'm not going to say I'd be upset when an invention happened, because there was a lot of hard work and trial and error. But, I had so much curiosity that, it would lead me to the next thing, but it almost, was a little sad to leave something that I was enjoying so much trying to figure out. Mm-hmm. So there was a little of just wonderment. So, whenever one project would end, there was really no end for me. It was always, the same project was going on. It just so happened that different conclusions and good things came out of it along the way that were able to be useful and productive.
And you had mentioned the fact that the device that we're recording on today is really just an extension of the original recording devices. So what are your thoughts on where we're at today with recording? And if you were here today, where do you think it's going, and what would you be looking to create for the future?
I don't know. I mean, I guess there'd be some areas I would be expanding on, but I think of part of my curiosity likes things that haven't been found yet. So maybe there's new categories of things, because sometimes I think that we could get so used to the way things are that we may not find new and better ways to do things. Mm-hmm. So I think a part of my curiosity would be there. But I think communication things may be interesting if they were attached to the brain, because a lot of things and a lot of problems happen from miscommunication.
Right.
So what if there was a way to record information in a way to tell the receiver the accuracy, the intention,
the tone,
and the heart value, and the tone, mm-hmm. and the real meaning behind things? Because I think that would eliminate a lot of problems and actually build a lot of relationships.
What are your feelings on things like AI and where that's headed as far as technology? And I mean, it's not specifically related to communication, but it is related to sort of I think an extension of what you developed initially.
Yeah, I'm trying.
Well, I guess my question would be if you were here today, would you be working on AI, or do you think you would be working against AI?
I think my best guess would be that it would depend on how I truly felt about a human's ability to be responsible and a machine's ability to be responsible, and a human's responsibility to be rational and a machine's responsibility to be rational, and sort of I'd have to understand that line a little better. I don't know if I enjoyed the learning process so much that it would be less fun for me to have a computer go through 100 analyses mm-hmm. before putting two things together, mm-hmm. because it would already tell me that wouldn't work. I don't know if I would enjoy that because I enjoy the process,
right.
or I would be excited about how many more things I could do having a worker like that.
Sure.
But I think that I enjoy that so much that I don't think it would necessarily benefit me to have something do all of that for me, because that was just such part of my experience.
Gotcha. So would you be, are you concerned about it, I guess, as part of, and you may not have any concern or feeling about it one way or the other, but I think that I think when you think about inventors and technology and, things that you sort of built the foundation for with many of these devices that you created, there's a logical extension, I think, to say that you would probably be one of the top inventors today, and that seems to be on the forefront of innovation right now.
I think I would enjoy that aspect of having those resources available, but maybe in the quiet of a room as a thinker, and someone who enjoys thinking, I think it would upset me a little to think that there would be less thinkers.
Right.
And less people involved in the process and less creativity, because I don't know if you can actually artificially create creativity. It has to be put into the program.
Well, I think that's really, I mean, that gets into probably a deeper conversation that's different from what we're discussing, which is ultimately, what are we really creators of creation, right, in our own thought, if that makes sense. So
we're actually, I mean, my thing is, we're receivers who, mine for gold. You know what I mean? We use our gifts and talents, and things are given to us to be able to do it, and it's our choice to maximize them and find those things that were meant to come through us.
Yeah, and I guess that's like I said, that's probably a deeper conversation on that, as far as what creation is and where that comes from, I guess, is really what I was trying to imply there. So, all right, well, thanks for the time.
Yeah, I gotta go.
I got some stuff to do.
I gotta go, man. All right. Our next guest, Mahatma Gandhi. Prominent Indian political leader who campaigned for Indian independence. He employed nonviolent principles and peaceful disobedience. He was assassinated in 1848, shortly after achieving his goal of 1948, shortly after achieving his goal in Indian independence. In India, he is known as the father of the nation. When I despair, I remember that all through history the ways of truth and love have always won. There have been tyrants and murderers, and for a time they can seem invincible, but in the end they always fall. Think of it always. Short biography. Born in 1869, Porbandar, India. Mahatma was from the social caste of tradesmen. His mother was illiterate, but her common sense and religious devotion had a lasting impact on Gandhi's character. As a youngster, was a good student, shy young boy, displayed no signs of leadership. On the death of his father, he traveled to England to gain a degree in law. Became involved with the Vegetarian Society and was once asked to translate the Hindu Bhagavad Gita, the classic of Hindu literature. Awakened in Gandhi a sense of pride in the Indian scriptures, of which the Gita was the pearl. Around this time, he also studied the Bible and was struck by the teachings of Jesus, especially the emphasis on humility and forgiveness. He remained committed to the Bible and the Bhagavad Gita throughout his life, though he was critical of aspects of both religions. On completing his degree in law, he returned to India, where he soon sent to South Africa to practice law. Struck by the level of racial discrimination and injustice often experienced by Indians, it was in South Africa that Gandhi first experimented with campaigns of civil disobedience and protest. He called his nonviolent protests satyagraha. Despite being imprisoned for short periods of time, he also supported the British under certain conditions. He was decorated by the British for his efforts during the Boer War and Zulu Rebellion. 21 years, returned to India in 1915, became the leader of the Indian Nationalist Movement campaign for home rule in Swara. Let me see. Encouraged his followers to practice inner discipline to get ready for independence. Let's see if we... Gandhi was a seeker of the truth. In the attitude of silence, the soul finds the path in a clearer light, and what is elusive and deceptive resolves itself into crystal clearness. Our life is a long and arduous quest after truth. There you have it. And so much more.
Yeah. Yeah, he's
all
interesting character.
Ready?
Yep.
So, when do you feel the change happened from a shy boy to someone who felt they needed to speak out?
Well, I think that, with the passing of my father, I almost felt like a responsibility to take over that leadership role a little bit. But I also, as I started to have more experiences, especially outside of, India, I started to see, just different cultures and how it, in the way I was raised was to be shy and quiet, but there are ways to be vocal without being, demonstrative, right? So, started to find that the importance of having a loud voice. A loud voice sometimes always just seems to come across as being, the person who can scream the loudest or make the most, disruption, and that there's a time and place for that. But for coming from the perspective that I came from, I found that it was a little bit better to have a strong voice and a firm voice, but it didn't necessarily have to be the loudest voice or the most aggressive voice. It needed to be more based in logic and reason, which was influenced by the law part of my life that allowed for there to be an understanding of how to find that balance between trying to pull a little bit of, not to say rip the emotion out of it. You can be emotional, but you still have to have dialogue that still is based off of trying to find a common ground there and a common goal, which is more based in objectiveness versus subjectiveness.
Now, I think a lot of people, when they see great men do great things or have great quotes, they may have the perception that that person may have to experience less fear, or like your comment just about tyrants or bullies, and that they always fall. Some people may have the perception that you could be so strong in that belief that you don't fear tyrants at all, while as the general public has days where they, whether they say it or not, they truly do have fears and concerns, but it's usually people's ability to respond as if they don't, even if they do, that makes them great. So where are you on that spectrum between knowing that tyrants always fall and having zero fear, and the line of having fear and still doing what needs to be done?
I think that it's there's still going to always be the reality of a combination of the comment of tyrants always fall is much more of a long-term perspective, right? The fears that you're also talking about is more of a day-to-day concern. And sometimes I think that when you try to have that conversation at the same time, it gets muddled because you can be fearful daily, but they're part of the having the perspective of understanding that tyrants fall inevitably. It allows for you to have a perspective that at least eases some of that fear that the pain or the struggles or the issues that we're going through today is only temporary.
So you can respond properly.
Correct. You can deal with it.
Long-term response to a short-term
right.
situation.
And taking action to do that and understand that those actions, change doesn't come, even though sometimes change looks like it comes in an instant, there's incremental things that happen to the point where it seems like it's instant, right?
Like a bucket overflowing.
Right, exactly. So there becomes the only way you can handle that fear, not only handle the fear and deal with the fear and cope with your day-to-day, but also take action that can then be a part of that, using the bucket as the example or the analogy there, is that adding a little water in that bucket, even if it's only one drop, so that way eventually the bucket overflows.
Even if it's not in your lifetime.
Even if it's not in your lifetime, absolutely.
Yeah.
And that's a challenge. Exactly. That's a challenging thing for a lot of people to want to commit to. And I don't think
I'd rather put a drop in another bucket that overflows in my life.
Most people would,
right.
or say, if it's not going to overflow in my life, then I'm not going to put anything in that bucket, because that's just their perspective. And I think, like anything else, there's just as there are people that are trying to alter people's thinking to not put anything in those buckets. My job is to make sure people are willing, or at least inspire more people to be willing to put more water in the buckets, even if it doesn't affect their lifetime. Whether it's they're motivated by their kids and they want their bucket to overflow in the kid's lifetime, or they're just understand that from their moral perspective, there's a greater good than themselves, and they're willing to do that. Right?
And it's important to realize that we actually have a choice in what bucket we put things in.
Yep.
Because
the quote that I think most people, think of me for is, an eye for an eye leaves everyone blind, right? So there's, and I do believe that that's where, when you think about that, and unfortunately in much more of a Western culture, that tends to be the idea that, they did this to me, so I'm going to do that to them, and it just becomes this retaliatory, never-ending, perpetual, action and reaction situation. So I think that the Eastern side of the philosophy that I believe in is much more of, that doesn't make sense for there to be that level of violence necessary to be able to find the right thing to do. Now, that doesn't mean that there aren't going to be people that take advantage of that, because they're going to see that as a passive position, and an opportunity to exploit that. And again, that goes back to the original statement, which is that's just a tyrant and a bully who's going to try to.
Battle.
It's a long-term losing battle.
Yeah.
Because ultimately, that power leads to to the desire for more power and more power and more power. And once you lose, even if temporarily you've motivated enough people to be on your side to take over power in that particular part of the country, or at some point you lose your own people, because you start worrying about these tyrants and bullies start worrying about so many things that are really not even there. Sometimes it's just it's all about maintaining power, and ultimately they end up losing their own people, and then their people rebel against them again. So
my last question is, this is not the way it is, and that's a good thing, but if you were only able to have one virtue, what would it be?
Virtue. It's I don't know. That's tough. I don't even know if I could even pick just one.
Was it silence that was your major tool, or was it the non-violence part, or was it both? Or
there was. I always felt like just trying to lead by example and be willing to do whatever it took, and not that. And trying to show people that I'm not just somebody who will sit up and say something, but I'm willing to put myself on the line through hunger strikes and things like that. Ultimately, I was assassinated, but the hardest times was when I wasn't eating to prove a point. To try to get people to stop. With the violence between the Muslims and the Hindus in India. So a lot of that was really probably the most difficult part. And so, for me, it was just always being willing to do whatever I felt like was necessary to lead by example, and not just be somebody who said, hey, let's try this, or somebody else should try that. But I wanted to make sure that I led by example in that way. So,
and just to make sure, I want to be respectful. If I mispronounced any names or any books or any areas or regions, that was not my intention.
Well, and we went into this knowing full well that this is just a conversation game that is meant to really, I've learned things that I didn't know already about some of these people, and that's really part of the idea, is to say, what have I learned, what don't I know, and then we're just kind of riffing on that from there. And people are either interested in those types of conversations or not. I think for you and I, one of the reasons why we like these conversations games is because, and we almost have to have a disclaimer before every conversation, right? Which is, we don't have any specific opinions or agendas, or we're just trying to have interesting conversations that make us think and become better, because we have our own perspectives on our own lives, right? And sometimes these conversations can and strengthen those things, challenge those things, shape, mold, alter, adjust. And that's for you and I has always been what these conversations are always about, is to walk away thinking about something in a way that we didn't before we had the conversation. It's never really been about the accuracy of the dates and times and names, and because at some point it really becomes about the spirit of the conversation, and I hope that people understand that.
Yep. So, I think we're all good, right?
Yeah. Thanks for listening, and thanks again for the time today. We'll talk soon.